Um, so we're jumping in this moment. We've been having a chat, me and Asha, till now. But I kind of stopped the recording, going like, I don't quite feel right, and I stopped and I noticed myself um, wanting to just be a lot softer. I think before I was speaking in a way that's kind of like, oh, make something happen, make something happen, and finally in this moment it reminded me of like this scene when like like a porn actor trying to get hard and they're like deflating.
Mm.
That's how I feel and be like, being like, I can't get it up. I can't get it up today. That's not the vibe. Can we be like, can everybody, can we make a different video? So that's kind of, softening in, and actually making it okay that, um, yeah, I feel a little bit, yeah, softer or something like that. Not so, um, yeah, not so oriented towards something. Yeah.
Performance.
Hmm?
A performance.
Yeah, I mean, or like a soft performance is okay. But I literally felt like, oh my God, it's like that having to perform. I'm like, I think I heard this happens on porn sets, and that's like exactly what I feel like I'm experiencing. And I don't know, the podcast is new too, right? So it's like it's an experiment for me to even talk to different people and record it, and wondering if it's worth recording and all that. So I'm just kind of like, oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Um, so that's a place, but yeah, I think the maybe um, the interesting thing to say and tell everybody is that like so uh, Asha has been it started off as a client of mine. That was like wasn't that in like 2017 or 2018 or
It
something?
was it was 2019.
2019. Okay. Oh, it seems like a long time ago, but like I feel like
Pandemic.
our relationship has changed so much since then, right? And
Mhm.
like I think the way you interact with the world seems so different compared to then.
Mhm.
But yeah, we worked together for a little bit, and then Asha was a student at the Rituals Justice School for her first course, and that was in 2020. And yeah, since oh, okay, yeah, yeah, the tender spot is Asha has been. Uh, I've always had some fragility around, like, what does Asha think of me?
Mm.
Interesting, right? And it's gonna be admit it, and it's probably not necessarily something that is like, there's Asha, and then there's my projection, right? And one we already talked about, like, kind of like my relationship to Black women and Black femininity, especially when I've been quite critical of how the orthodox kind of industrial complex and in the activist world revolves around kind of this proximity and social capital around Black femininity. So it's become this kind of very polarized industry. Um, and we can revisit that, but maybe we can just do that later. But when I was making those critiques, I was like, didn't want to do this thing where you're like, I'm not racist. I'm friends with like da 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 people, and Asha was one of those da 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 people, or like Black women in this case, not da 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 people, obviously. But and I was kind of like, oh, please come save me, but also like I'm not supposed to, and also like it's a real secure attachment thing to not. It's like not needing validation to make the critique. That was like a real moment for me. And the other thing I felt really like, whoa, um, I think the new feeling is like the feeling of being outranked by you, you know, on some things.
Mhm.
You know, because obviously we start out a relationship, me outranking you, or we're in a ranked relationship where you're a client and a student, right? But like with all that stuff that was going on around me for behind the scenes, and then more recently above ground around kind of these allegations of harm posed to me and stuff like that. And you know, you can go on my blog and I have a whole thing on it, and you know, I'm very centered in that, like um, the allegations and the things that I know of, they're quite unsubstantiated and don't involve people that I would say I've harmed. I mean, because I know who those people are that might say those things, and I've also been recently in contact with them. But um, you know, but it's been a hard passage, and even despite like the actual claims themselves being like quite uh, like problematic in the sense that the people who are calling me out, at least recently, there's a real conflict of interest and malpractice issue that's going on. And you know, there's a client, that former client of mine, let's say, that's experienced like transference with me, but I essentially yeah, did not exploit that situation, explicitly did not. And you know, I know that person is like involved in the claims and stuff, so it becomes very messy. It's like um there's a lot of like uh yeah, stuff in it, um and I find it really, really unfortunate. And I guess like you being like a consent educator, right? Like, and you've been doing that work for the last like 2 years now, I think. Oh,
Oh,
actually, when I met you, you're already doing it.
mhm. Yep.
Right. And so like it's been a real thing for me, like feeling fragile in a relationship, like feeling like I would not want to lose your approval. That's how
Mhm.
I felt about not just as like a former kind of practitioner person of yours and a former teacher. It's like just there's like, oh, I don't want to lose this person's approval. That would really hurt.
Bold of
I,
you to assume I'm giving out approval.
well, you know, like, or like,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, well, you know what I mean, like your kindness or whatever. That would be like, oh, that would really be that would really be something.
Mhm. Yeah.
And yeah, like, yeah, so much because I think you know these kind of like allegations that happened kind of really put this damper between me and doing work around sexual trauma, you
Mhm.
know. And it's interesting probably because for somebody who's said like, I essentially publicly said I don't believe survivors. I also don't believe survivors. I don't not believe survivors, but nobody sticks around for that part, right? So it's like I don't believe survivors, but I don't not believe them either. It's kind of like it's not this either or thing. Actually, nobody sticks around for that part, but that I'm actually quite passionate about the subject of sexual trauma. Uh, Yet there's this been kind of like these things that happen that really pull me a lot further away from the work. And yeah, in the midst of all that, you know, you've definitely been somebody who's like, oh, it would really suck if Asha felt bad about me or something. Uh,
If I canceled you.
if you canceled me, you might downgrade your subscription or something. I don't know. So I don't know, like, and uh, yeah, I've been. What would I say here? Oh, see, I'm still like kind of like floating above. Let me see. Like I can feel like half my body like this from my waist up, and my other half is like wobbling and missing. And
Mhm.
I can feel actually a lot. Ooh, like even like I imagine myself half my body submerged underwater, and I can't even see it, my body underneath. And there's probably a lot of emotion actually here. That's what I'm feeling. And that, okay, so that brings me a bit online again. I can feel my like hamstrings a bit. Yeah, it's like this electric buzzy feeling I can't quite ground into. And I'm still getting all this like, I'm supposed to say this, I'm supposed to say that.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Mm-hmm.
So funny that you talk of approval.
Well, I mean, there's a part of me that's like, mommy.
Like the image that was coming to me was like Spider Mom.
Oh,
Of like,
really?
yeah, I don't know.
Oh.
I'm not in the business of approving people. And
Hmm.
I think people that know me best really delight in me disapproving of them. Yeah.
Hmm. Uh,
Mhm.
uh, what's this Spider Mom thing?
Uh, like, oh, I don't know. It's a very big spider. um, when you say hold me, that was the image that was coming.
Hmm.
Um, and you talked about not being able to feel your legs. And I feel like I have many legs.
You have, okay, many legs. That's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, are there like somatic kind of experiences you have, like sensations you feel with that image? So I can play with that spider.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my hair is brushing my lower back right now. Maybe that
Hmm.
is also contributing to that sensation.
Hmm. What's the sensation like?
A little comforting, kind of like whispery in the back of my sacrum,
Hmm.
well, right on my sacrum.
Hmm. Interesting. So like my response to like, Spider Mom and that disapproval, it's like, oh, that's the game you want to play. Kind of
Mm-hmm.
like, it's
Yeah,
funny that you're like, hold me. Your response, I can be Spider Mom.
like
Um,
a little bit. I'm like, try and get me to cancel you, Tada. Like, really try.
you want me to try
Like,
to get
I
you?
would like to see you try, and to be afraid of, or to have that concern in that moment around the cult of Black feminism is like, try harder.
Try harder to get myself canceled. Uh,
By me.
Interesting. Like, so that relaxed my groin. So that, interesting. So now getting into a bit more association. There's like, try to get myself canceled harder. What I can tell you, well, let's see what would try to get myself canceled harder. Um, I don't know if this will like get me canceled more. Like it's an inquiry on like, does this spider mom have like a texture of like blackness as well?
Mm-hmm.
You're like,
Mm-hmm.
okay. Because I was imagining, I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to, say nothing, but I was
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, this is like Black Spider Mom. Now it's like
Yes.
you're like reaching for your tea, and you're like, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
um, I love the consent question in all this.
Yes.
Right. So I'm feeling a little bit of like more the memorotic feeling now. Like, because
It,
I like the
me
like,
too.
oh, that's not gonna get you canceled, boy. You gotta try harder.
Me too.
Well, because I think what's okay. I mean, I have an idea. I'm gonna write it down. It's a consent question actually around how um around, black womanhood and how you're in eroticism. But yeah, no, I'm just noting it down. But yeah, I'm curious about. Okay, let's go with the. I'm blushing now.
Mm.
All right, so hmm, what would get me canceled? Disapproval, disapproval. Wow, now I just got this like feeling that's actually then this actual black spider mommy is actually quite expansive then of what they can deal with and what they can accept.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and now I'm imagining myself being like, oh, it's very scary, but it's interesting. Like, being, well, I guess when a spider wraps up their prey and they do
Mm-hmm.
that spindly thing. I don't know. Do you consent to me? Like, if this is a consent question, how do I do this? Like, I'm taking your image and I'm starting to enfold myself in it.
Go ahead. I'm with it.
Go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. I'm gonna let myself wrap myself up in that kind of. I don't know what they call. What do they call it when a spider wraps up their prey? But so I'm feeling a little bit of fear, but also feeling, starting to feel some comfort or warmth. But hmm, hmm. Ooh. Well, yeah. I mean, it's interesting that the thing that comes to me is this like fear and comfort together is like in some ways my relationality to black womanhood. There is this kind of fear and comfort together. I can feel, or that's how I'm analyzing it. There's a sensation of like this thing that's closing in on me. Is it friend or foe? And um, because it's, yeah, there's like this texture of black womanhood meaning death. I feel like you've talked
Mm-hmm.
about this, right? So um, just so lost right now. Um, and actually, the thing lately, actually, I've been kind of meditating at night with and going to sleep with is surrendering myself to Black Mother.
Mm-hmm.
So that I've been doing that for the last 2 weeks or so, on and off. Um, yeah, and I notice even in myself in this moment, there's that. Maybe it's because you brought in a spider too, right? Like, but there's that like dualistic kind of like, or like non-dual, like, oh, comfort and fear coming at the same time, and yeah, yeah. Mm. I mean, the question that seems to um, come from below, I would say, I wouldn't say it's like all out arousal or anything, but it has like a smidgen of that. Is the question is, are you going to devour me now?
There it is.
There it is. Okay.
Mhm.
All right.
So that
Well, I'm
fear,
really, I'm really uncomfortable with this. Um,
it's okay. We
okay.
got
Okay.
this.
Okay. You got this. Okay. Okay.
We can
Okay.
hold
Okay.
this.
All right. 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 I've never really been topped. Just so you know.
Okay.
I'm not saying that's what you're doing right now. Like we haven't negotiated anything, but it's kind of like,
Mhm.
I mean, I think we're
Adjacent.
already in the game, so it's kind of like might as well say what the game is. And but yeah, are you gonna devour me? And that's what makes me. That feels like the kind of like mini Kundalini speaking. Like, oh yeah,
Yes.
you're like there it is.
Mhm. Yeah, the fear and arousal binary. You said fear and comfort, and that's kind of that. I think you mentioned that peak and valley and recovery. The
Mm-hmm.
comfort isn't like in that recovery space, the
Mm.
plateauing out space, but part of the ride up is the fear and arousal going back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to clarify, the peak valley recovery Asha's speaking about is from like a course that they took, and we talked about the nervous system having this kind of pattern where a single neuron firing off, it's like boom, goes to a peak and then drops to a valley, and then there's a recovery period back to the threshold again.
Mhm.
So this is like, yeah, comfort being at that place. And yeah, um yeah, so it feels like my body doesn't really know which to choose, doesn't know whether to go to the peak, to the drop, or the comfort it's experiencing all at once, I think. So that's part of like the confusing feeling when I say like, yeah, um, do you want to devour me? Well, what's the answer from Spider Mommy?
Sorry, my cat. Um, it also
Mm-hmm.
needs attention. Um, there's the ultimately you will be devoured, but it's more fun to play the game of try and cancel me till then.
Mm. Mm. Okay, now I feel blood flow. Um, I don't know what's going on over there. What's happening in your soma?
Yeah, lots of buzzy running energy in my legs, very
Mm.
energized, um, settled in like a rock in my pelvis.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, my pelvis feels more like lava. Um, it's like heavy molten feeling through my. This is like the fourth podcast recording I talked about my balls, and it's like, it's like I don't know why it's happened, but it's actually my like number one check if I'm associated right now. You know,
Mhm.
so I get this. What were you gonna say?
For me, it's my anus. I'll just say it.
Oh,
That's
really?
my check. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
how you check?
Mhm.
How's your anus feeling right now?
Settled.
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 Right, right.
Mhm.
I think it's so what I'm experiencing, and I'm still being very verbal. What's interesting, it's like, so there's a few things that are taboo, obviously, right? Like, one, obviously, us talking about any of these things, and you've been my client and I've been your practitioner is like a very taboo thing. I mean, like, technically it's been 6 months, so it's like whatever, but also like it would be quite a taboo thing. Another thing is that you've been a student of mine in 2020.
Mhm.
Right. So all these things are supposed to be not okay. So I feel like part of that taboo of that, and yet I can feel in telling you that, like, like, oh, like my testicles are experiencing this kind of flow and blood flow and molten lava feeling. I wouldn't say it's like peak arousal, but it's like some kind of movement. And and obviously you said your anus is feeling settled, so you're able to sense your anus. It's interesting, like the taboo feels more grounded than not um not working with it.
Mhm.
And something that's been like, yeah, I think part of what I'm struggling with here is really like, in this moment I'm kind of workshopping what's the edge of my new practice now
Mhm.
that includes arousal, includes the genitals, and that, there's this problem with a somatics that doesn't integrate eroticism somehow. And
Mhm.
particularly, it doesn't mean you have to have sexual arousal all the time. That's not, we're not hyper fixated on that, but the exclusion of it feels very like, I can notice how ungrounded it is, you know? Uh, and it's interesting because I've been looking at this. We'll get back to Spider Mommy. I just can't deal with. We'll have to come back to Spider Mommy. We will. I'm like tagging Spider Mommy, but like before we started this part of the recording, there was this conversation we were having about you, like, being a Black woman and being asked to play a certain role,
Mhm.
which is maybe the role of the counselor or something. Like, there's this archetype that you're talking,
Yes.
Black
Mhm.
woman, like, can you represent that opinion Black women are supposed to have when we, let's say, hashtag listen to a Black woman? Thank you, Asha, run for it, do it, please. And you're kind of like, I think the consent and eroticism question there is a really interesting one,
Mhm.
right? Because I'm starting to like think of all these kind of things that we do online or whatever, and like whatever conversations and activist conversations, any conversation is like eroticism that isn't owned. And when, and that fucks up the consent question because um it's like when people are asking you to top them without like really owning it, and
Yeah.
that's like their erotic drive to be punished and be like, oh, you've been very bad, and that's what they want from me. But you're like, actually, that's not how I feel erotic about this situation,
Mhm.
right? Or something. There's like, that's not how I feel fully alive. Yeah, curious how you. Yeah, I don't know. So
Mhm.
I'm like, you're like, so like,
Yeah. There's So the way I think of consent is the etymological meaning of with feeling with, feeling together
mm.
is what consent
Oh,
means.
okay, that's what it means.
Mhm.
Oh,
Comes
okay.
from the Latin con, meaning with, and
Mm,
sentire, meaning to sense.
mm,
So feeling, even there, is more about the sensations. And
mm,
we can pull apart sensations and feelings, but I think that's something to really ground into.
mm,
Consent is this process of aligning sensations or negotiating sensations with
mm,
some within yourself with somebody else.
mm.
And like the way you could actually get canceled by me is to not own those sensations. Like that's how.
Right, 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 right.
um, yeah, then you're playing a different game, one I don't consent to. Like
Mm,
that. Yeah, the hiding.
Mm.
In the erotic part, I also define eroticism differently than most people would. I think it's sort of just really linked to the sexual. Sex
Mhm.
is actually harder for me to define than eroticism. um,
Interesting. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
eroticism is that feeling and sensation of being fully alive.
I really like that, by the way. I've been telling that to everybody,
Yes.
or I've been using that definition
So
everywhere.
that's Audre Lorde.
Oh,
Um,
that's
that's
Audre
part
Lorde?
that's part of her definition.
Okay.
And
No,
she is an interesting
right.
Black woman in Black feminism.
Hmm.
Yeah, for
Hmm.
sure, especially around
Hmm.
consent.
Hmm.
Um, and I have a different conception from her as well. It's not, for her, it lends towards this kind of like vision of excellence, of feeling fully complete in yourself and never settling for anything less than that. Um,
Hmm.
I think of it differently. Um, and she also really compares that to, she makes a binary of the erotic and the pornographic. Pornographic
Interesting.
being sensation without feeling is how she would define it. And I have issues with that too, and also resonate some. um, yeah, eroticism, that feeling of being fully alive. And I've been reading this other book by Georges Bataille, French man. Um, he talked about eroticism as assenting to life up to the point of death. Um,
Hmm.
Assenting, another version of consent, like that positive consent, going with the sensation of life all the way up to the point of death.
Hmm.
So, and then what's death? What do we think death is?
Hmm. Yeah. I can also feel we're like touching into like um like George Clinton vibe. I can feel like George Clinton. Is George Clinton still alive? Well, I just see the spirit of George Clinton, like walking around with like skulls in his hand. Like kind of, the rhythm and. Mhm.
Mm.
Yeah, and I feel a little bit of warmth in my legs now. And yeah, I think the question I'm asking in this moment is like, what does it mean to be in fully alive relationship with you right now, even as we record this? And it's kind of like, um, ooh, interesting. This is such a okay. I don't know if this is ever going to be released because it's like kind of like strange what's
Yeah.
happening. But I'm gonna lean in. I'm gonna lean into something, and you can tell me how it goes because it's kind of funny. This is all immersion weirdness. Um, I'm gonna say what makes me feel fully alive to say in this moment. Um, ooh, I'm trying to think like who am I speaking for? Okay, I'm kind of nervous. Like I don't know. Like I had a funny session with my therapist yesterday, and asked them if they can kiss me. So it's like shit's been wild in my train. No, I think the thing that makes me fully alive to say I'm attracted to you, Asha.
Mhm. Mhm.
Now my eyes are wandering, but interesting.
Much rather you admit it. If it matters in the moment, then admit it.
You're like, yeah, see, I'm not, yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm gonna say I'm sexually attracted to you.
That's fascinating because we've never met in person.
I know. So this is like we're talking in Zoom spirit land too, right?
Mhm.
But like I don't know. I was just going with like what would help me feel fully alive in this moment. Like what would I need to say to feel fully alive? And I
Mhm.
can feel myself a little bit more fully alive right now.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I yeah, that spider mom came back. I've wanted to work with men or people with masculine bodies around consent, like especially from the beginning. That's a lot where that came from. Um,
Hmm.
and like I've experienced consent violation by mainly from men. Um, and that was a part of it. And in the trying to do work with men around consent, like them not being able to own their attraction to me, even in especially in that educator space, teacher student space, is a detriment to them actually learning anything about consent for me.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I am in like with the nonprofit that I teach with mainly around consent, I'm in like straight space. They
Sorry,
started
what?
in straight space. Oh, that's kind of what I mean. We started in sex positive space and we still teach a lot in sex positive space, but the way I show up for me, it's like I'm in straight space of I'm
Hmm.
in that professional hat, professional
Hmm.
mode, and like
Hmm.
kind of white mode even.
All right, not Black Spider Mommy mode.
No,
Okay.
I want to carve out more of that space. It doesn't need to be created because I'm carrying it, but carve out a space for that to
Hmm.
fill up in the work that I do. And I'm trying to do
Hmm.
that more on my own.
Hmm.
But I think even in straight space, it not being acknowledged is a detriment to the education that I do.
Hmm. Well, yeah. Um, tell me. Well, let me see. Is it tell me more? I'm trying to still like.
I feel Joe Rogan's energy, and I don't even watch Joe Rogan.
What do you mean?
Um,
Like you're Joe Rogan?
no, no, in this experience of I don't know, somebody made that meme of you of like the Tada experience.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. This is like Joe Rogan meets queer animism is like basically the theme of the show. So it's like everything that's not supposed to fly will fly a little bit.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like that's exactly the vibe. Um, Let me see. So staying with that. Um, and just trying not to get lost in my brain here because I think it's so easy. Um, so when I say like my body question, I'd be like, okay, yeah, no, that's the thing that I want to throw out. Like, so Asha, do you want to tell the world about the dream you had? Now we're gonna reverse the tables. Reverse the tables, bro. Okay, because I already told you that I think you're hot, and you're a former client and student. That's super not okay, apparently. So let's just reverse the tables a little bit.
Mhm. Um, yeah, I told you this recently, um, but I can own my sensations. I'm very much in the practice of that. That's my consent praxis.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, I think it was after Rituals Justice School finished, which was a very intense experience for me. There was a lot going on personally
Mm-hmm.
that was just like synchronizing with the class in ways I desperately needed at that time, um, including stuff with death, for sure. Um, and then after the class ended, I had a dream.
Well, hold on. Like, tell us about the death, though. Maybe like this is
The
a this
death.
is an erotic story. Let's build up to it.
Okay,
Give
sure.
us the death.
It was the death.
Well, because I think that's the major thing that I felt like has changed since when you were like my client. It was kind of like there's such a big difference between how you show up now and how you're showing up then. It was like, oh, I remember even 3 or 4 months ago when I was talking to you, I was like, oh, it's like I'm talking to somebody who's already been initiated a bit,
Mhm.
as much as initiation we can experience within our modern society, right? Like, I was like, wait a second, you're talking about death and all this eros and all this stuff in a totally different way than I remember you as a client, where I'd say, like I said earlier, like, oh, you're a young one, and it was 2 years ago, but there's this market difference that I feel like even allows for us to have this conversation that's not supposed to be okay, apparently. So,
Mhm.
yeah, love to,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, I think right before rituals justice started, I had an abortion. Um, the first one, probably only one I'll have in my life. Um, and yeah, Western medicine gave me Vicodin for that, and I took it all. And it was not what I would recommend for myself, looking back, 2020 hindsight. Um, and throughout the course, I was ritualizing that grief in a lot of ways. And I didn't know that I was even allowed to experience grief from like the social justice sphere I was so embedded in. Thought I was only supposed to feel empowered. Um, and I did not. Um,
Right.
so a part of my own healing has been for the last couple of years with plant medicine, um, cannabis, always, and mushrooms, and later acid. What was interesting with acid was like I was on acid and when I was pregnant and didn't know I was pregnant, and
Mm.
I was doing Hara breathing and just listening in.
Wait, so you're doing Hara breathing and acid together?
Yeah,
This is not what I necessarily prescribed, but that's kind of cool.
yeah. Um,
So just so if the people are listening, Hara breathing is like a belly dantian breathing thing. But yeah, anyways,
mhm,
yeah. Right. So you're on acid and doing Hara breathing. That's kind of cool. Maybe that is a big deal. Maybe that is a big deal.
mhm. And
Yeah.
like the way you had framed Hara was guts and pelvis and genitals. I understood to be part of that, and I had
Hmm.
been including that. But when we were in our like client practitioner sessions, I was not mentioning my genitals, and neither were you. you
Oh,
know, like,
right. Yeah, I was not talking about my balls. This has
no,
only been a month.
yeah, no.
Right.
um, and
Can,
but
can
that
we?
was a part of it. Um, and so when I was on acid, that's what I was practicing. And like I guess my uterus talked to me and told me I was pregnant. Like I started thinking about
Oh
giving
shit.
birth and what giving birth would be like. And I've always had like a big fear of it. It's like this
Uh,
thing. I had a vision when I was like 13 of me dying, giving birth, um, and always been afraid. But I was on LSD doing heart breathing, and my uterus was like, nah, you could do it. Like, yeah, you can do that. And I was just like, huh, maybe I could do it with acid.
wait.
And
Do what with acid?
give birth on acid. And so I Googled it while I was high to like look it up later. I was like, LSD birth.
Okay. Okay.
And
Hmm.
apparently people have done it.
Right. I
Um,
mean, people have done a lot of things, but yeah. Okay.
yeah,
Wow. Uh huh.
but it was just so random. I was like, why am I thinking about being pregnant and giving birth? Like,
Right.
what?
Okay. Right.
Um, didn't think anything of it. And then a couple of weeks later, I'm like, oh shit, I'm pregnant. And then that came back. I was like, oh my God, my uterus told me. That's wild.
That it's a super wild. Holy shit.
Hmm.
And have you been practicing higher breathing the entire time since we were clients up to the course, or were you
Yeah.
kind of like consistently through those years? Right. Can we just do a small rewind back to you said like you didn't talk about your genitals, and I didn't talk about mine certainly at that time in our
Hmm.
client work. And I actually have a different stance now. I actually talk about my genitals with my clients now. Not that like I'm not like not needing to put it in their face, but it's kind of like I mean, okay, so that came out really wrong.
Yeah.
But but I mean, like, I'm not like going like, oh, this is how my testicles feel now. This is how it feels now. But more just like role modeling, like
Mhm.
breathing in and then loosen your genitals, like not being fragile around it. Because I think I was a little bit more fragile because like, what would people think? And then the things around the allegations came, or so I'm like even more tight, going like, I'm not going to talk about sexuality at all, or like, or like I don't want to do anything that makes it seem that I'm turned on or anything like that.
Mhm.
Um, so that's interesting that you're mentioning. I didn't talk about my genitals in the work that we did, and I'm curious, how did that feel? How do you feel about that now, looking back? Is there like, because I find it now like the moment I get to talk about my genitals, there's a reset of my system, even as a practitioner, to like such a deeper level of groundedness that didn't exist before for myself. So I'm curious, like, what do you look back at? Like, how do you, like, were you experiencing things that I didn't know at the time? Like, you weren't reporting, or like, well, how would you say?
Nothing significant,
Okay.
but the fact that they weren't mentioned. Um,
Mm,
and I remember one point you were like, "Oh yeah, you're a consent educator. Like this is your thing." And I got a little hint of that, like maybe insecurity about rank there. Um,
mm,
that it felt a bit like maybe it was a protective measure, but perhaps towards me. Like in other
mm,
trauma-informed spaces I would be in, that's the kind of thing they would do too. We're not going to talk about our genitals. Even while we're talking about being in our body, we're just going to like leave a hole a little bit in this area.
mm.
Um,
Right, right, right.
and that's supposed to be trauma informed somehow. Um, to me, I feel like it actually makes me more vulnerable to feeling like my consent might be violated by someone.
Really?
Um,
Huh.
yeah.
Right. I mean, I'm curious how you track that.
Well, I mean, like, there's just if I have a different conception of safety in general,
Mm.
but for you to say on this podcast that you're sexually attracted to me in this kind of forum, that grounds me. Like, I feel like, okay, it's out there.
Well, that's the thing that's happening, right? Or
Mhm,
like kind of like, yeah, right, right, right.
mhm. If that question of belief ever comes up, like, it's just right there. It was owned from the beginning. Like, that's fine. Um,
Right, and the interesting thing, that didn't exist when you were a client.
yeah, I didn't think so.
Yeah. I think something changed. So let's just say, like, your hair got longer or something, you know what I mean?
I didn't used to wear it down as much. That's true.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah,
part of
yeah,
it.
yeah. No, no,
Um,
but like, and it's different now for whatever reason. You know, just saying, just saying. But yeah, so it helps you be like, if there's like more honesty or something,
yes. Hmm.
right?
Um,
Mm,
yeah, and even for myself and how I show up as the young one, try and
mm-hmm,
de-sex it all as if
mm,
young people can have sex.
mm-hmm.
um, I was getting somewhere with the dream. Oh yeah.
Well, actually,
Um,
even before the
sure.
dream again, I'm like wondering, like, um, part of what I wonder is like, can you imagine a working style with clients? This is kind of like where I'm going to, where like if the person's attracted to me, if I'm attracted to the person sexually or feeling arousal, like it could actually be part of the practitioner client work.
Hmm.
Because I feel like that's where I see like there's a interest in me moving over to like um well, one, because having the experience of a client having transference with me, and I think a lot of what happened in distortion of that, and I do believe they got manipulated, but not by me, but the person, other person who's calling me out on like that was transference. Like that's not cool. That the person's seems like they've been manipulated into um, thinking I was exploiting them or something, which is a very odd dynamic. Just even not having the space, somebody not having the space to say, I'm experiencing these things. and have that not be exploited or oppressed. And I think that was really lacking at the time. So I feel like where I'm going to a lot more is, well, what does that mean when you start to invite that then? And then once you invite that, there's also new material for new energy for the work to develop. And there's something about like, I don't know, I think you've seen it because you're part of the tea room too, right? And you know my conversations, and like moving towards something that like practitioner client work that's more not explicitly erotic, but has that as a actually an available option if that's what the energy that's presenting,
Mhm,
which to me seems a lot more like it is actually like it does approach like sex work,
mhm,
like it's like inherently erotic labor, but even though it's not uh yeah, well, how do you feel about that now? I'm curious about like where you're going, right? And we'll get back to the
mhm.
dream. Like the dream is
Sure.
the long thing, right? But how do you feel about that? I'm curious about like, because my sense is like if I tell that to people, that makes me more unsafe to them. So I'm curious about like, and for maybe for some people, it that would still be the case. But I'm curious about, yeah, for yourself,
Mhm.
would that have been helpful even at the time? I'm not sure.
Mm, at the time, for the intentions of what we were doing, no,
Right,
it would not have been helpful. Um,
right.
but if that were somebody's intention, if it aligned with that, I think it is helpful to bring that up and to be very clear about kind of like directionality, like how you were saying, not going to be exploited or repressed. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there's so much there, and just like somebody owning their attraction and like, and I won't do anything about it. Like in right in front of you, I won't do anything about it. As somebody that like works with survivors of domestic violence and all kinds of sexual assault, just to have that could be a very transformative experience. Um,
Hmm. Okay, my stomach did a thing there.
mhm,
It's like worlds. Okay, yeah, no, this is very serious shit. Okay, I'm listening.
mhm,
Yeah, yeah.
mhm.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, that's so much of, oh, wow, okay.
Hmm.
I started thinking about, I don't remember when you mentioned it, the anti Blackness. Um, avoiding the erotic feels anti Black to me. Um,
Yeah.
there's so much there about like projecting like
Hmm.
fear and arousal wrapped together onto a group, um, and like making it their problem. And if like, where are the role play spaces you can have
Hmm.
where somebody owns it instead? Um,
Right. I
yeah, like
mean,
how we were talking earlier about white people telling me to like go dom, go dom for me, go, and it's just like ah,
that's the fear and arousal coupling there again, right?
mhm. And pushing it off to somebody else, like that's a Black woman's role to go and do that in a social justice space. Go put everybody in their place for me. It's like, what are the feelings coming up in your genitals right now that
Well,
are
that's
leading
like,
to you making that request of me?
yeah, and you know what's really, I don't even know if this will make the recording, but you know what's really kind of like striking for me in my position about kind of the allegations that are coming to me in the specific places where they're coming from, um, and like they've, it's really interesting like how I felt like the implications of like me like kind of to paint a picture of me was this like partying sensuous erotic man, right? And I'm kind of like, oh, is that me? I kind of, well, now I am because now I got called out. I was like, fuck yeah, I'm gonna do that. um But at the time, I wasn't really. I was kind of like, oh, okay. I guess like, especially when I'm in queer space, I feel like very like fun and like always have whiskey and then like talking about kink and like, hey, but it's not necessarily like I don't necessarily think of myself as sexually menacing or something like that. Like just looking at myself and going like, I don't seem like that person. Um, and also, like, literally, when the person said, like, it's documented. Apparently, I said, "Oh, it feels like a date. I think we're having a three-way cocktails on Zoom." You know what I mean? It's like the situations they're talking about that I said something, and I'm like, I think that's very paranoid. Like, this is probably. I think I was like eating sausages and pouring myself whiskey, and I was like pretty like, we're about an hour in and laughing our heads off, like when I said that, and it was like a three-way conversation. It wasn't like not like a client session or anything like that, right? And it's not being brought out of nowhere. So that was kind of like interesting. But what am I saying? It's like, um, it's interesting to me because that I think partially that fear of like male erotic sensuality and dancing and having fun, it is a kind of anti-blackness in and of itself, I feel like, or I felt that particularly like because the crunchy thing is like these folks are really into rediscovering like Black Jesus, and I'm like, what do you think Black Jesus was like? I think Black Jesus was like, you know what I mean, like hanging out with sex workers and partying with the gays and getting drunk and eating meat. I think that's what Black Jesus was doing, right?
Hmm.
Like when you look at the history of Jesus and early kind of like the Mediterranean cults that were around Jesus at that time, they're all like Dionysian cults. So they're like cults of ecstatic dance where they danced in circles, right? And so it's said that there's a book called Dancing in the Streets by Barbara Ehrenreich, and she talks about like the original cult of Jesus was probably templated after these dancing cults of the Mediterranean. So Black Jesus was actually like a partier, and like the later the church pews and things got put in so that it's not like basically like the Last Supper was like a hoedown, and it like that never made it into the Bible. They written out the dance part, so it's kind of like they've written out the blackness. And
Hmm.
part of like what I felt was really interesting, the critique coming after me is like, this is, I feel like you're kind of actually struggling with the blackness in Christianity, and you're kind of projecting it onto me because you're seeing me as this Dionysian kind of person, and then now I'm like, well, actually, yeah, you're right. I am kind of like that, but it's way less dangerous than what people think. I think when they see the actual thing, and I think maybe that's the part I'm looping back into when you're saying like when the attraction and those things are owned and transparent in the space, you actually settle
Hmm.
something. I don't know.
Hmm. And I think back to being raised Southern Baptist in not the South, in very white areas,
Hmm.
in Canada, and then in Las Vegas. Went to a very weird Southern Baptist church there.
Mm-hmm.
um, and that, yeah, they're the ones that are famously like no dancing, um, no sensuality in that way. That's dangerous.
Mm.
And then the sexuality and the sexual attraction that isn't owned creates so much space for things to be hidden and like for bad things to happen.
Mm. Yeah, because I think the erotic energy is always there, right? Like when I feel like it's like when it's not owned, when you're talking about like white folks wanting you to dom them, and you're like,
Mhm.
no, I don't actually want to. Yeah, I think it's very similar in like some Christian communities where like the striking down of sex is really horny. It's like
Oh,
shutting down, it's ecstasy, and then and you have this, and then your head will pop off as you orgasm, and you'll go to hell. It's like that sounds really hot what you're doing, but you're not quite, you're not feeling the hot. You know what I mean? It's like disconnected from the actual erotic feeling. Yeah.
yeah. I had this experience when I was young, probably around like 7 or 8, when I was like playing in my belly button and I like poked kind of far, and there was like a pole from my belly button all the way down to my genitals, and I like had a vision of like red and blackness, and I was like, oh, that's hell. Like that's hell inside me. Oh, that's scary.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
And now I'm just
Mm.
like, that's so bad. Of, yeah, that
Mm.
conditioning, that spirit that they actually invited into that place, the churches.
Mm. Do you struggle with anti-blackness within yourself in that kind of way? Because I feel like that I hear that as internalized anti-blackness in the sense of I think the picture of hell, where it's like all this sex and dancing, which I think hell is actually sex and dancing for Europeans. It's literally the thing that, like, hell is the album cover for Marvin Gaye's "I Want You."
Ooh,
Do you
yeah.
know what I mean? That's hell, right? Like people in ecstasy and like partying and drinking. That's like this is the place where you don't want to be. It's like literally Marvin Gaye's "I Want You." That's what I picture
Mhm.
that album cover. So yeah, I mean, do you struggle with anti-blackness in self and body in that kind of way, or I mean, I know it's a huge question, but I mean,
Mhm.
you said you found hell inside, and where you're like, cool.
No, I'm scared. I was so scared.
Mm,
Um, and yeah, I was scared of like the power I had through masturbation, example, and then the power I realized I had over making like at a young age to recognize sexual attraction in grown men, be afraid of that.
the sexual attraction from grown men or to old men, or
From grown men that people would point out to a child to be like, you were flirting with him, and you're just like, what? Like, no,
mm,
okay, so that man had arousal, and you're projecting it onto me as if I must have done something,
mm,
and that's definitely linked to my blackness. Like, that's a thing with Black girls is being sexualized younger than other women.
mm.
Um,
And how do you square that though? Let's say though at the same time, that's um, I feel like I've seen a lot of, it's like, yeah, you can try canceling me. Try canceling me, anyways. Like videos of like young Black girls on YouTube. They're like maybe 7 or 8, and they're at the barbecue and they're like shaking. They're like shaking their ass, and all the adults are like, "Woohoo! Show me your ass! Show me your ass!" Um, yeah, I mean, I think what I'm saying is like, uh, I feel like from more than most cultures in on Turtle Island, you know, I've seen like I guess in like Black cultural spaces, a child's sexuality is kind of or sensuality is celebrated, like genitally, anally, pelvically, and also kind of allows it to be itself without needing to intervene in it, but also not to shut it down. Because I think a lot of like when you see those videos on YouTube, the comments are like, "I can't believe these people are like animals. They can't let their children do that." And I'm like, "Yeah, well, that's why like yeah, like
it's
you know what I'm
hella
saying?"
anti-black.
No, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, that's hella
Yeah, it's
anti-black.
hella anti-black. Yeah, yeah. So I'm
Yeah.
curious about that, like the agency and da piece. It's like, how do you square with all that shit?
Mhm. Well, I had a white mom. Um, and so you have that space. Like, I had 3 sisters. We can create that kind of space. And
Hmm.
that sexuality being allowed to like flourish is, like you were saying, you let them have it, let the kids have it without the adult intervention.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like, where does that intervention come from? It's like the gays. If you put that on YouTube, now you have like all these white people watching you, um,
Mm.
and people outside of your community um,
Mm-hmm.
who you can like keep those people accountable, or you should be able to keep those
Mm.
community. How do I stare with that?
Oh,
Um,
sorry, your sound dropped out just a little bit there.
oh, better.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay. I was just thinking, how do I square with that? I don't know. Can you ask me more?
Let me see. Yeah. Oh no, maybe the question is actually deeper underneath. I feel like my relationship to Spider Mommy is getting a bit softer now. There's a lot less fear. it's interesting tracking. Like being devoured by her feels like a lot more chill, a lot
Mhm.
less painless, a lot less pain than I was envisioning before. Maybe we'll continue with the LSD and the Hara breathing. Come back to that track.
Sure. Um,
Yeah.
so that happened, and then I had the abortion. Um, and just those Western drugs are so different. Of like,
Hmm.
yeah, hydrocodone, not recommended, I think, for what could have been a very erotic experience at the moment of having an abortion. Um,
Interesting.
yeah, it's very much you just don't care. And the other
Hmm.
thing they don't tell you, or at least they didn't tell me about opioids in that way, is they'll give you constipation. They often also prescribe laxatives with them because that's just
Uh,
a known side effect.
right.
And
That
I'd
means
never.
your body is going into constriction. If there's
Mhm,
constipation, so the opioids are actually constricting your
mhm.
sensation. Right.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I'd never experienced that in my life. It was a birth as well. It was just terrible.
Mm.
Um, and so then I was in the rituals justice school and um, coming back to those psychedelics. And oh, I also broke up with my partner at the time and asked him to move out
Hmm.
and was, yeah, just grieving a lot and looking at myself and my anger and a lot of old ancestral stuff.
Mm.
And took a bunch of acid.
Hmm.
And my head was like, what are you doing? And in my heart, I was like, you need this. This is it. um, and yeah, exorcised some demons and saw my ancestors in this bookshelf behind me. And they talked to me and also saw death, like a woman on a horse.
Hmm.
Um, and she told me she was inside me the whole time and irritated at being ignored. Mhm.
Hmm.
And it was like I like fell to my knees and was like, okay, like you have that
Hmm.
moment of like, I submit, I consent
Hmm.
to having you. Mhm.
Having you, as in like
With
having
me.
death, having death in me.
In me.
And was
Mhm.
that before your abortion or just after?
Well, so that's a very binary view of it. It's not a 1 day thing.
Oh.
It is not. It is at
Hmm.
least for me, it was a 2 month thing.
Oh wow. Okay.
Mhm. Of bleeding on and off, mostly on, and
Hmm.
going back to the hospital for ultrasounds. And
Hmm.
my hormone level wasn't going down fast enough. Like my body still thought I was pregnant,
Hmm.
even though the cells were technically gone. All the human growth hormone and stuff was still pumping through my body. Um, and that made a lot of sense of why, like, I hadn't had the actual abortion experience, hadn't actually let it go.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, they just don't. I'd taken classes in sex ed about abortion. I knew the mechanics of it. I'd had a
Hmm.
medical abortion at home. Um, and but they just don't actually tell you what it's really like. Um,
Hmm.
looking back, I wish I had an abortion doula, somebody to guide me through that.
Right. Yeah. I mean. Uh huh.
Mm-hmm. Um,
I guess I'm hearing that they're really connected to like it's this could be an erotic experience. It sounded like it did still like recover some of the eroticism by meeting death and being like death is actually in like death is in your womb, right? Like if I guess like
mm-hmm,
that's what your experience was at the time.
mm-hmm,
Hmm.
mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a smell that it makes you think of death. to be frank.
Wow,
I had
really?
to Google it. I was like, is this a thing? It is a thing that people with abortions will tell you, but not something you hear in like a class where we can't talk about our actual genitals and sensations and bodily functions, even when we're talking about sex. Like, it's just, it boggles to me.
Right. Wow. Hmm.
So when I think of that like client practitioner relationship, we really do a disservice by not by acting as if we don't, there's a hole down there where your genitals are. Like, fill
Hmm.
that space up, talk about it,
Right.
give voice to the sensations. Or
Hmm.
yeah, so that felt very much like an initiation with
Hmm.
death. And then I had um, a masturbation ritual practice that I'd been doing for a while and was including death in it and having these erotic experiences of grief. Um,
Wow.
yeah, and I've kept that up. It's felt necessary.
Hmm.
It's not nearly as intense, but
And go on, go on. Let's get
yes,
to the goods. Let's still get to the juicy
yeah,
part.
yeah. So this was through the rituals justice school while that was all going on every other however many weeks. And then after, I felt like I was kind of coming down. And I think Dare was talking about this the other day of like people kind of like have these peak experiences and then you kind of like really grandiose for a while. I was definitely there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I do that all
Like,
the
oh
time.
my gosh, I've seen death and she told me things.
Yeah, yeah.
Y'all just, yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Uh-huh.
I'm very cringe now to look back. Um, but yeah, I had a wet dream one day and I've had those often throughout my life.
Hmm.
Um, and you and Dare were in it.
I wanted to capture this moment. This is the animist Joe Rogan experience. Everybody.
Yeah,
Right, right. Can you give us a little bit more detail around that?
yeah. It was a. hmm, My dreams tend to not be super visual,
Hmm.
but I was in a house and like the house was like very kind of like laid out where I was like, oh, interesting. Not a familiar house. It was like you, me, and Dare had moved into the house or something. I was like, hey, I'm living here,
Right, right.
living here with Tana and Dare, random, and you felt like my uncles, um, and like my uncles slash teachers, and like
I mean, we are kind of your uncle slash teachers, like literally. Right. Yeah, yeah. Age wise and everything, right? Yeah.
mhm.
Hmm.
So that was cool. And then I don't think we talked or anything. We're just kind of like bustling around in a home way. And then I go upstairs to my room and start masturbating. And then I woke up. Yeah.
Great. Um, I don't know. Capturing that on tape was my crowning achievement for today. um, need we say more? Need we say more than that? Um, Now I feel Spider Mommy is like really embracing. That's how I feel her now. And it's kind of like there's like a little bit of, well, telling the world like, well, if you want to cancel me now, I mean, you really can cancel me now.
Cancel me too.
Cancel you
I don't
too.
know who wants to cancel me, but I'm up for it.
You're so gonna get. I mean, yeah, you'll get canceled. I mean, you're like a self canceler, right? Let's be real. You're like
Yeah.
kind of a hermity self canceling person. I feel like you've already taken the I'm gonna cancel myself road or something.
Most deaf.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if we need to record much more, but um, Yeah, Black Death Spider Mommy. I feel like maybe we can just wrap up with like a little prayer or something for all the spirits that kind of came through. How does
Mhm,
that feel?
mhm.
Because I feel like there's something about like like ending on that note and just like not resolving it and just letting people deal with it
Oh gosh.
and being
Yeah.
like bye. But
Mm,
I really feel like like Black Death Spider Mommy is like the message I'm getting from them, or the transmission is like, now you're doing the thing I want to do, so I feel good about it. Like you're
mhm,
not making me do the thing that I don't want to, and now I feel you're doing the thing that I want to, and everybody's happier with that. Like I'm happier as Tada. Spider Mommy is happy. Asha, how are you feeling?
mhm. I'm happy. Mhm,
Yeah, and um, yeah, I like to bless all the beings that have shown up,
mhm,
or even just like yeah. I feel like Black Death Spider Mommy is like the composite of all the beings that have shown up. Um, so a lot of appreciation for her, and I feel even the kind of cocooning that she does is kind of protective of our space, even
mhm,
like protects us from the outside.
mhm.
And there's a feeling of like needing to die if I'm willing to allow her to embrace me. So that saying that lets me, my heart actually really moves when I say that. Like if I don't die into her, I don't get to experience her protection either. Um,
Mhm,
yeah.
mhm.
And anything on your end you like to add, Asha?
Yeah, just the consenting to death, consenting to die. Mm. That eroticism is the like the all encompassing of that. You don't consent to die. Spider Mommy does not want to play with you anymore.
If you don't consent to die?
Hmm. And yeah, other ghosts come in, scarier ones. Spider Mommy is really not so scary.
Spider Mommy is really not that scary.
Mm-mm.
Lots of projection on my end, for sure,
Mm-mm.
at the beginning.
And she's pretty hot. Let's on in.
She's totally hot. Blessed to her for being a hot Black Death
Yes,
Spider Mommy.
yes. Mm-hmm.